Hey guys, how's it going? Value Venture Investing here today. So we finally saw Air Canada report here again on Friday. We had Q2 of 2020. The stock is of course not responding the best. As of Friday, it's down over 6%, nearing $15 a share again here. And now we're looking at the market cap of about $4.478 billion. And now this is a company that has about $8.6 billion in cash. They're saying about $5 billion, but I'm including their short-term investments as well, because usually those are counted as cash. Don't know why they're not. So today what we're going to be talking about is whether or not I'm going to be buying more, if I'm selling my shares, and I'm going to give you guys a rundown of what happened during this last quarter, some things that were said on the conference call, and we'll quickly go through the financial statements as well. So the big top line number there, revenue was, man, that was a huge hit, $527 million. That was a huge hit. We'll get into the financials. I'll show you how that compares to a year ago. Earnings per share was a loss of $6.44, huge. And like I said, cash grew because they're trying to bolster their cash positions to $8.6 billion. So let's get right into the financials right now. Starting with the balance sheet here, again, like I said, their cash and cash equivalents is over $5 billion. I don't know why they didn't include their short-term investments, so I'm going to include that. That's liquidity. That's short-term liquidity there. So their total cash equivalents, and short-term investments is $8.6 billion. Even year over year, that grew from $5.8 billion, and it did grow from last quarter as well. Additionally, I would be inclined to include some of their non-current assets here, specifically their investments at $774 million, because at a dire, in a dire situation, they could utilize that as well. It's not classified as a short-term or a not a current asset, but I would include that as well. So their total assets actually increased year over year to $29 billion. Again, their liabilities here, if you watched my last video, I was talking about how this was maybe a bit of a concern in terms of their advanced ticket sales. Decreased slightly from last quarter. If you want to see that, watch my last video, and actually decreased from year over year. So that's a good sign. Looking at the long-term debt and lease liabilities, that actually increased slightly, but we knew that because they're going to be getting new planes and stuff like that. If you want to look into that note, there's a note 6 there in terms of deeper dive into that. Again, watch my other video. There's no sense going through that again. They were mentioning that quite significantly on the last video. Now into the big numbers that we wanted to see, the income statement here. So we have a year over year comparison here. Of course, the passenger revenue just got slaughtered, $207 million. And that was down from $4.3 billion a year ago. The only slightly saving grace here was the cargo that increased to $269 million. That was from $177 million a year ago, and from last quarter that increased as well. They also have other. I'm not sure exactly what that entails as well. So their total revenues were $527 million versus $4.7 billion a year ago. So that's probably why the stock's going down. I think a lot of people thought this would be pretty bad, and for sure those have dropped significantly. In fact, the drop in passenger revenue has been over 96% year over year. If you're looking at their operating expenses here, you can look at each individual one if you want. They're doing their best to have cost-cutting efforts, and of course some things are going to be less, like aircraft fuel, wages, because they're laid off like 50% of their workforce. So if you look at their total operating expenses, it's pretty much half from a year ago at $2 billion. But still, with that huge reduction in revenue, their operating income loss was $1.555 billion versus $422 million gain a year ago. To make this slightly worse, there is some other expenses as well in the non-operating income. Of course, the only kind of saving grace in here was a foreign exchange gain of $242 million versus $117 million a year ago. So that brought the net income, well, in this case a loss, to $1.752 billion versus a $343 million gain a year ago. And of course, the EPS was a negative $6.44 versus a $1.28 gain a year ago in Q2. Looking at what they're doing with their cash, operating cash flow, so net cash flows used from operating activities was a negative $1.251 billion versus a $1 billion positive operating income a year ago. Of course, to get this, you're going to take the net income, so that's where you start with the net income of negative 1.752 billion, and you add back non-cash expenses. So you can expect with a loss like that it was going to be pretty bad. Again, where all the money came from, financing proceeds from borrowings was $3.867 billion. They also issued $553 million of shares, so that gave them a net cash inflow of over $4 billion. Investing resulted in a negative $316 million reduction in cash there, and so that brings an increase in the cash and cash equivalents for the period of $2.5 billion approximately, and so the cash equivalents at the end of the period were just over $5 billion, and you can see that above when you look at their balance sheet. So now looking into some of the comments that were made on the conference call here. Again, like I said, 96% drop in passenger revenue. Oh, but we're expecting this. And they kind of go at the end of a conference call and they're really talking. They're kind of angry, the CEO, about what's going on. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Again, it's less than 4% of what they had a year ago. So if you're wondering why these numbers are so bad, it's because they're essentially shut down. Again, we were looking at their operating expenses there on an income statement. That was a 64% reduction, and they reduced their staff by 50%. Huge cost savings. They're really focusing on that. They're pushing that in the conference call because, of course, they need to weather this, and so that's something that they're talking about as well. They said about $5.5 billion in new financing, debt and equity. We just looked at their statement of cash flows, and I didn't see quite that much. It was a 4-point-something billion. So maybe I missed something there. I'm not too sure exactly what they're talking about there. Comment down below if you know what that discrepancy is. They're retiring 79 old aircraft from the fleet. And of course, as we know, if you watched my last video, I'll put a link right here to that one as well if you want to watch it, that they are acquiring new aircraft as well as retiring old ones. So that's part of their plan. Again, I believe they said this last quarter as well. They're comfortable with $2.4 billion in the cash on the balance sheet. They're much better than that right now, so they're really well off. So I feel quite comfortable that they can remain viable for quite some time. And as they mentioned, they haven't even had any assistance really whatsoever, except for the wage subsidy program from the Canadian government, just kind of being left alone, unlike the States, who's helped some of their airlines and stuff. The acquisition of the Transat is still on. They said they reserved the right to really talk about what was going on. So due to all the regulatory uncertainty, who knows with that, but that's definitely something I think going forward it could be huge. And the one that everybody's probably really interested in here, the net cash burn. A lot of analysts, I'm sure, are following this really closely. So it was $1.7 billion. Ouch, $19 million a day. That's huge, but keep in mind, last quarter it was about $20 billion a day, so they're really trying to cut costs, like I said. In Q3, they said that they're going to have a huge amount of capital expenditures due to planes and leasing these planes. So I think they said $3 to $4 million per day was just going to be for the capital expenditures. But even so, they're saying it's going to be down again, $15 to $17 million cash burn per day. So they're getting more efficient as time goes on. And hopefully, maybe they have some sort of assistance coming in from the government by then as well. Q4, they're giving no guidance, which makes sense to me because we don't really seem to know what's going on by the day. Things in certain parts of Canada seem to be getting worse. Things in certain parts of the US seem to be getting worse. But in general, they're getting better, and that they were pretty adamant on the conference call that it's kind of unfair what's going on in terms of the restrictions that are imposed upon them, because they're essentially shut down, and the numbers are stating things are getting much better. And they've been saying that air travel is relatively safe, considering how air quality is controlled on an airplane and stuff. I'm not an expert on that. I don't know. I'm not going to make any judgments on that, but they're quite angry that they're not getting assistance and that they're essentially being shut down, and that Canadians' rights are kind of being infringed. They even touched on that, kind of being infringed upon in terms of allowing people to travel and stuff like that. But regardless, I'm looking like 5 years out plus, right? Eventually people are going to fly again. So did I sell my shares? Am I buying more? I haven't done anything, but looking at Air Canada around 15, seeing how much cash they have and seeing their market cap that low, I mean, it's getting extremely competitive. So I'm thinking I'm going to be buying a little bit more personally myself, just my own opinion. If it drops anywhere from 12 to 10, I might even buy a little bit more at this level. But I just kind of have a feeling that things might get a little bit worse before they get a little bit better in terms of what's going to happen in the fall. but I still think it's an extremely, it's like a 5-bagger in 5 years, maybe more, who knows. So it's extremely compelling. So we'd love to know what you guys think. Leave the comment down below, and don't forget to like the video. Again, also, there's a link in the description for Webull to get 2 free stocks if you guys are interested in doing that as well. It was a promotion that was given to me. So that's going to be it for today, and I'll see you guys in the next one.